I always thought my life was more ordinary than complicated. We lived in a quiet neighborhood in Rochester, New York. No big crises, just routines. I worked at a tire shop near the highway. My wife worked from home as a virtual assistant. Our daughter went to the local public school, walking there every morning with that huge backpack. I'm saying this because looking back, I think I got too used to the feeling that everything was normal enough. My wife's family had always been intense. Her sister lived a few miles away in a small town called Pittsford, and the niece had been attached to my wife since she was little. There had always been this strong bond between them, and I didn't mind at first. I remember when I started dating my wife. She talked about her sister as if she were talking about a lighthouse, someone who guided her through hard times. And that was fine. Everyone has someone who holds them up. Except that, over the years, that presence became a kind of shadow. My wife talked to her sister every day, sometimes for hours. It wasn't just catching up. It was asking her opinion about everything. The best hallway light bulb, how to organize the pantry, what I should or shouldn't do with the shop's money. On some nights, I came home exhausted and found my wife on speakerphone with her sister, talking as if I were just a temporary visitor. At first, I laughed about it. I thought it was just sisters being close. But there were times when my laugh died halfway. Like when I said something and my wife replied, "Wait, I'll see what my sister thinks." Small things, I thought. No big deal. Everyone has quirks. The truth is, my daughter noticed before I did. One day, coming back from school, she walked through the door and dropped her backpack on the living room rug, sighing in that dramatic teenage way. My wife was on the phone with her sister, again, and didn't even look up when the girl arrived. My daughter coughed just to be noticed. Nothing. Then she said, "Mom," softly. Still nothing. So she gave up and went to her room. I stood in the hallway watching the scene. Something about it bothered me, but as always, I thought, it's just a moment. Tomorrow will be better. But it didn't get better. Another afternoon, we were having dinner. Roasted chicken and rice, something quick because I got home late. And my wife suddenly said, "My sister's daughter won a science award today." My sister said it was emotional. The principal even called her up on stage. I smiled because that's what I was supposed to do. "Good for her," I said, trying to keep it light. My daughter was poking at her mashed potatoes, distracted, but I noticed the way her expression tightened as the conversation dragged on for long minutes, and it really kept going. My wife wouldn't stop. She talked about how the niece stood out, how much potential she had, how teachers adored her. And I watched, with a bit of shame, my daughter shrinking in her chair as if trying to disappear. It was a constant, silent comparison. Sometimes I caught myself looking at my wife while she talked about the niece as if she were the brightest child in the state, and wondering when was the last time she had praised our own daughter like that. It was just a regular Saturday morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard my wife in the living room talking to her sister about a decision of ours. Ours. Something I thought we had settled together, but apparently had turned into a group consultation. I stood there listening, without the courage to interrupt. My wife finished the call and came into the kitchen as if nothing was wrong. "I decided we're going to do it differently," she said, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. My sister thought it was better. The way she said "my sister" was the first undeniable sign that something had slipped out of place. I didn't know that was only the beginning. During the week, almost every afternoon, I arrived around 6. My daughter was usually at the kitchen table doing homework, trying to concentrate. I always tried to sit with her, ask about her day, those simple routine conversations that help kids feel seen. "Hey, how was your day?" "Normal," she'd say without looking up. One late afternoon, my wife walked into the kitchen carrying 2 bags. My daughter and I were talking about a history assignment she had to do about the Cold War. Then my wife opened the bags and pulled out piles of craft supplies. Poster board, paint, brushes, stickers, glue, markers, so much stuff it looked like she'd bought the entire store. I thought it was for our daughter, but it wasn't. My sister's daughter has a science fair project, and my sister asked for my help to make everything perfect, my wife said, emptying the bags on the table. My daughter froze. So did I. "She asked for all this?" I asked. "Not exactly," my wife replied, pushing the packages across the table. "But I thought it'd be good for her to have more options." And then, without noticing, or maybe noticing, my wife grabbed the one set of paintbrushes our daughter had been saving for weeks to redo an art assignment. She picked it up and dropped it into the bag, as if it were nothing. I felt my daughter shrink. It hurt more than it should have. It was just a brush, just an object. But it wasn't about the object, it was about the gesture. "Mom, those brushes are mine," my daughter said. "Oh, sweetheart, you can use other ones," my wife replied quickly, without looking at her, and she kept packing things. I froze, unable to say anything, but this time my daughter looked at me, and that look, half a plea for help, half a plea for fairness, made me open my mouth. She was saving those for a project, I said, firm. My wife finally looked up. God, you two are so dramatic. It's just a brush. And she went back to packing. My daughter left the kitchen without a word. I stayed there, staring at the supplies she was setting aside for another teenager, while our own daughter had to beg for attention. Another small scene. A Sunday night around 8. We were watching TV in the living room. My daughter was sitting on the rug. I was on the couch. My wife got a text. Suddenly, she stood up and started looking for her car keys. My sister's daughter forgot her basketball uniform at a friend's house. My sister is exhausted. She asked if I could go get it. I stared at her. It's Sunday, honey. So what? She needs it tomorrow. She had already decided she was going. But that week, something even worse happened. We were choosing a dessert to make for the weekend. My daughter suggested chocolate chip cookies. My wife, without even thinking, said, "My sister's daughter hates chocolate chip cookies. Let's make apple pie." I took a deep breath. "But we're the ones who are going to eat it," I said. "Yeah, but I can bring them a piece too. They love pie." My daughter got up and went upstairs silently. My wife didn't even notice. And that was when I realized, without a doubt, that something was really wrong. It wasn't me exaggerating. It wasn't my daughter being jealous. It was neglect. Emotional abandonment disguised as family help. But the turning point, the one that changes everything without anyone noticing right away, didn't happen in a single day. It was a slow accumulation. It started on a Wednesday morning around 7. I was having coffee when I heard my daughter coming downstairs. She always woke up looking rumpled, like someone who hates mornings. But that day she looked even more drained. She opened the fridge, stared inside for a few seconds, then closed it without taking anything. I found it strange. "Hey, aren't you going to eat?" She shrugged. "I'm not hungry." My wife was in the living room, on the phone, laughing at something her sister had sent. When my daughter turned her face, I saw it, her eyes slightly red. She had been crying. "What happened?" I asked quietly. "Nothing," she answered too fast. I was about to insist, but then the living room door opened and my wife came into the kitchen with the phone still pressed to her shoulder. "My sister's daughter has a fever," she said, worried. "My sister asked me to stop by later, bring soup, help with homework, maybe even sleep there if needed." She talked while opening cupboards, grabbing pots, completely forgetting that our daughter was standing there, looking like a ghost in the kitchen. What came 2 days later only made everything worse. My daughter had a small reading recital at school. Nothing huge, just a few students reading texts they had written themselves. She was nervous, did her hair, put on a simple dress, practiced a paragraph in the hallway mirror, until my wife turned to us and said, "Oh, I won't be able to go. My sister's daughter has extra basketball practice today. She asked me to go because she wants to show me a new move." My daughter smiled, that fake smile she uses when she doesn't want to cry in front of someone. "It's okay, Mom," she said. "You don't need to go." My wife just grabbed her keys and left. On the way to the recital, I kept seeing my daughter's sad face in the rearview mirror. And it was on the school stage, watching her up there with a trembling voice, searching the crowd for someone she already knew wouldn't be there, that I felt the first real fracture in our family. When we got home, my wife was already asleep. She didn't even ask how it went. I stood in the hallway, realizing something inside me was changing in an irreversible way. And then came the day that turned everything upside down. I was organizing the garage when my daughter showed up at the door, tired, with an expression I had never seen on her before. She was holding her phone. "Dad," she said, "can I show you something?" She handed me the phone. It was a post from the niece, a video. The girl's mother appeared in the background celebrating, and my wife was with them, laughing, holding a huge poster they had clearly made together. The poster was for a school project, exactly the kind of thing my daughter had been asking for help with for weeks. "When did she go there?" I asked. "Yesterday, while I was at tutoring. I asked her to go with me, but she said she had another commitment. That other commitment was literally doing for another teenager what she refused to do for her own daughter." And then my daughter asked, "Dad, did I do something wrong?" That question destroyed everything that was still standing inside me. Update 1. That night, I sat alone in the living room for a long time, just the silent house. And for the first time, I admitted to myself that maybe I was living beside someone who had already decided that her own daughter was a second choice. I keep repeating to myself that no single event destroys a marriage. It's always a sum. But in my case, there was a specific moment, a final cut. It was on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of winter. My daughter had saved her money for months to buy a portable sound system. She wanted to record music with her friends, make a channel, nothing professional, just that naive teenage joy of creating something of her own. I had promised to cover the remaining amount at the end of the year. It was our little secret deal. That week, the package arrived earlier than I expected. I was excited, and so was she. But when I went upstairs so she could show me how it worked, I noticed something strange. Her bedroom door half open, the bed messy, her backpack on the floor, and her sitting in the corner of the room, hugging her knees, her face hidden. Hey, what happened? She took it. Who took what? Mom, she took the box. She said my aunt's daughter needed it more, that she had an audio presentation at school and didn't have equipment. She said you'd understand. I got up immediately and went to the living room. My wife was at the door, putting on her boots, holding the box, our daughter's box, with complete indifference, as if it were just an object, as if there weren't months of effort from a teenager inside it. Where are you going with that? Honey, don't start. My sister's daughter really needs it. Her presentation is tomorrow. Our daughter has time to save up again. I looked at the box, looked at her, and then thought of everything we had let slide. The ignored recital, the forgotten schoolwork, the laughter that was always livelier when it was for them. Give me the box, I said. You're overreacting, she shot back, trying to walk past me. I blocked the door with my arm. I said, give it back, now. She rolled her eyes, annoyed. Oh my God, you're making this into unnecessary drama. My sister's daughter has responsibilities, has goals. She deserves my support. I didn't know I was capable of feeling that much anger. And our daughter? When does she deserve anything? My wife didn't answer. She just shut down, like I was an inconvenience, like I was slowing down her life. It was that indifference, more than the box, more than anything, that broke me. I took a deep breath, pulled the box from her hands firmly and said, not today, never like this again. She tried to argue, but I didn't listen. I walked into our daughter's room and placed the box on her lap. I sat beside her and said, you will never be a second option in this house. Never again. When my wife walked into the room to continue the argument, I had already decided. I wasn't going to patch things up anymore. I wasn't going to explain the obvious to her anymore. I wasn't going to allow my daughter to learn how to survive in a place where she should have felt loved. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with papers I never imagined researching. Costs, options, lawyer contacts, documents I never wanted to see. The decision felt heavy, but at the same time inevitable. The next morning, I left the printed documents on the table. I placed a blank sheet on top with a short handwritten note. We need to talk. I've decided. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know how my wife would react. I didn't know if my daughter was ready for that rupture. I chose my daughter. And in that moment, I chose myself too. And that's when everything truly began to collapse. When my wife saw the documents, there wasn't an immediate explosion. No shouting, no slamming doors. It was worse. She just stood there, holding the papers with that same empty expression she used when shutting down emotionally from any conversation that wasn't about her sister. You're not serious. This is just one of your episodes. A phase. She really believed that everything, all those years of neglect, distortions, obsessive favoritism toward the niece, was just an episode of mine. She said, you're doing this because of her, pointing upstairs where our daughter was in her room. You're letting a hormonal teenager put ideas in your head. I wanted to punch the table. She's not hormonal, I said. She's hurt, and you know it. But she didn't know. Or if she did, she didn't want to admit it. My wife was a master at denying realities that didn't fit her version of the story. When I left for work that day, the house felt smaller, suffocating. And even so, it was the first time in a long time that I felt like I was doing something real to protect my daughter. The following weeks were a maze, calling the lawyer, scheduling meetings, talking to my daughter about what was happening, carefully. My daughter listened while sitting on her bed, trying to be brave. We're going to be okay, I said. I promise. She nodded, but she didn't smile. On the other side of the house, my wife made endless calls with her sister, telling her version of the story, probably painting me as a cruel man who woke up one day determined to destroy the family structure, as she called it. The tension kept building. One day, around 7 in the evening, she walked into our daughter's room without knocking. I was there, sitting in the swivel chair, reviewing paperwork from the lawyer. My daughter was doing homework. We're going to fix this, my wife announced, her voice carrying that conviction that only appeared when she talked about her sister. There's no reason for him to make such a big deal out of all this. My daughter closed her notebook. Mom, this isn't a big deal. Of course it is, my wife replied. Your father is being impulsive, and you're letting him manipulate you. Enough, I said. Leave the room. My wife stared at me wide-eyed, then stormed out, slamming the door behind her. After that, she started using silence as a weapon. She wouldn't talk to me, barely talked to our daughter, only texted her sister. She spent hours out of the house saying she needed air, and the few times we did talk, it was always about how I was destroying everything. You're going to regret this, she repeated. My sister's daughter said you're acting like a child. It was strange how she used the niece as some kind of moral measuring stick. The legal side escalated faster than I expected. Meetings with attorneys, documentation, discussions about assets. I thought my wife would at least be reasonable in that part, but she demanded absurd things. She asked for an unequal split. She asked for items that were never hers. She even asked for part of the tire shop, even though she had never been involved in anything related to my work. And she always justified it the same way. I deserve it. I dedicated my life to our family. Who are you to take this from me? At the same time, she tried to twist the narrative with our daughter. She knocked on her door. Honey, you know I love you, she repeated. Your father is confusing you. He wants you to be against me. Our daughter, on the other hand, became even more withdrawn, so quiet, as if she were holding everything inside just to avoid making things worse. And yet, ironically, she was the one who understood everything more clearly than anyone. One day, while I was cooking, she came up to the sink and said, Dad, when this goes to court, can I talk? Talk about what? The truth. Everything. I knew exactly how heavy those words were. I knew she was putting herself forward as a witness. The preliminary hearing came on a Monday morning. My wife was determined to get joint custody, regardless of what our daughter had asked for, regardless of the abyss between them. I stood beside my daughter in the courtroom. When they called her name to speak, I thought she would cry or say something incomplete. But no. She stood up, walked to the center of the room, and said the most sincere and painful thing I've ever heard. I don't want to stay with my mother. The judge asked her to explain, and my daughter explained. Slowly, methodically, without exaggeration. She described small everyday moments, things no one pays attention to, but that together became clear proof that she hadn't been a priority in a long time. I watched my wife crumble, little by little, the desperation spreading across her face, but it was too late. My daughter finished with, I don't want her to decide anything for me. I don't want her to have the right to force me to be around people who hurt me. I don't want her to have custody. I want to live with my dad. And when she walked back to where I was sitting, finally taking a deep breath, I realized that that girl, so young, had just saved herself. Update 2. After that hearing, there was no turning back. My wife began to show a side of herself I had never seen, a mixture of guilt, desperation, and misdirected anger. She called me in the middle of the night, saying I was destroying her life, saying it was all my fault, our daughter's fault. And while she sank deeper into denial, I began to understand that the hardest phase was only beginning. I thought that after the hearing, after all that raw exposure, after seeing her own daughter choose her father so clearly, my ex-wife would at least try to understand something, try to take responsibility, or at least step back for a while and process everything. But that's not what happened. The days that followed were strange. My ex-wife, now a visitor, no longer a resident, started showing up with this restless energy, a mix of desperation and wounded pride. She arrived talking loudly, trying to act as if nothing had happened. I'm still her mother. That doesn't go away just because you two decided to exclude me. But that wasn't true. No one had excluded her. She had excluded herself years before, when she chose her sister's family over and over again, as if ours were disposable. But admitting that would have been like peeling off her own skin. She didn't have the courage. My daughter, meanwhile, seemed strangely calm. A few days after the hearing, the news that changed everything arrived in the most unexpected way. Teenage gossip. My daughter walked into the house around 5, threw her jacket over a chair and said, Dad, you're not going to believe this. She pulled out her phone, opened social media, and showed me videos, photos, recent posts, all from the niece's profile, and one glaring absence. My ex-wife didn't appear in anything. The two of them went to Cape May for the weekend, my daughter explained. Just the two of them. My mom wasn't invited. And look at this. She swiped to another photo. My ex's sister stood next to her daughter in a cafe, smiling, with the caption, My true life partner. Another photo. Just us two, like always. My ex-wife wasn't in a single post. Not a mention. Not a tag. Nothing from that mighty bond she used to brag about with her sister and niece. And then my daughter said the sentence that echoed in my head for days. Dad. They cut my mom out of their lives. I just stood there, staring at those photos, stunned. There's more, my daughter continued with a mix of shock and sadness. My cousin's friend said they call my mom desperate and smothering, and that they don't want her around because she ruins the energy. The same people she sacrificed everything for. The same people she gave her time, money, affection to, while ignoring her own daughter. My daughter said, she broke us for them, and now they let her fall. A few days later, my ex showed up out of nowhere at my daughter's school pickup. When my daughter got into the car, her backpack hanging crooked, she told me everything in detail. She was waiting for me in the parking lot, my daughter said. She asked if she could talk to me. I almost ignored her, but I don't know. She looked empty. Then she told me how the conversation went at the park. My ex crying, talking too fast, admitting she had made mistakes, that she had chosen the wrong people, that she had put her sister and niece at the center of her life because she was always afraid of being alone, afraid of not being enough. She said she realized too late that the two of them never saw her as real family, just as someone useful. My daughter listened quietly. She didn't interrupt. She didn't comfort her. And then my daughter said something I would never have had the courage to say. I'm not angry at you, but I stopped expecting anything from you. And when you stop expecting, you also stop getting hurt. I asked her how she felt saying that. She gave a small, sad smile. Light. After that, my daughter threw herself into school, started studying music more seriously, made friends with 2 new girls, helped me cook dinner more often. Life after a divorce doesn't restart with fireworks or a sudden sense of freedom. It restarts in a crooked way, messy, with piles of laundry to fold, bills coming due. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to rearrange themselves around us. We both started therapy around the same time, she with a therapist who specialized in teenagers, and I with a psychologist recommended by the lawyer. At first, I felt ridiculous sitting in that chair, talking about things I had spent years trying to ignore. We reorganized everything: schedules, routines, priorities, even the living room decor. My daughter insisted on painting an entire wall dark blue, saying, "Blue feels more comforting." I let her. It was nice to see her making decisions about her own space. The house felt lighter, more alive, more ours. We were finally starting to live instead of just survive.